What if the real reason empires rose and fell was not war or wealth or worship? What if it was food? Not just what they ate, but how they preserved it, stored it, engineered it. What if the Incas could freeze dry potatoes without ice? What if the Egyptians sealed grain so well it stayed edible for centuries? What if the Romans used fermented fish sauce not just for flavor but for medicine and trade? And what if we have forgotten how all of it worked? Because long before refrigeration, before packaging, before modern science, there were systems. Whole technologies, silent, precise, powerful, that fed armies, stabilized cities, and outwitted nature itself. Today, they are missing. Lost formulas, extinct microbes, methods hidden in ruins, and fading oral memory. This is a journey into 15 of them. From mountaintop freezers in the Andes to water computers hidden beneath rice fields. From yeast passed down through generations to flavors molded by smoke and time. Each one a story left behind, in a jar, in a pit, in a bowl. And as we uncover them, we ask a simple question. If we cannot remember how our ancestors fed the world, how will we feed our own future? The answers are waiting. Let us begin. The wind is thin at 12,000 feet, and it bites. Each breath comes cold and shallow, as if the air itself is reluctant to be taken. High in the Andes, long before there were freezers or factories, I found a method of preservation that seemed like magic. Not written, not taught, but practiced with ritual precision. A circle of flat stones, a pile of pale potatoes, and the cold. The Incas didn't just store food. They altered it, transformed it, using only the raw rhythms of the mountain. By night, the bitter cold froze the tubers solid. By day, under a thin sun and arid wind, they were dried until the moisture was gone and memory was all that remained. This was Chuño, a food so light it could be carried across an empire. So stable, it could be stored for years, even decades. Not far from the potato pits, I found slivers of meat hung above stone racks. This was charqui, meat dried so well it would outlast a generation. What they preserved was not just food, it was time. The Andean highlands created the perfect cycle. Cold enough to freeze, dry enough to dehydrate. But the process was more than weather. The locals pressed the potatoes with their feet, wrapped them in cloth, washed them in mountain streams. This wasn't just preservation, it was purification. A family's worth of Chuño might be stored in a cave, traded at market, or handed to an army, because when the call came, the soldiers of Tawantinsuyu marched not on supply wagons, but on freeze-dried faith, carrying what they needed in woven sacks, light as air, powerful as stone. Historians today still marvel at the logistics. An empire that stretched for over 2,000 miles fed its people without tin, plastic, or refrigeration. And yet, as I looked closer, I began to realize something. Modern freeze-drying, with all our sensors and vacuum pumps, still struggles to match the microbial balance of ancient Chuño. We can mimic it, replicate the steps, but the texture, the shelf life, the resilience, those remain just out of reach. Was it the precise altitude, the exact temperature gradient, the particular bacteria that lived on those stones, in that soil, passed from generation to generation through bare feet and woven cloth? The recipe was never written because it didn't need to be. It was felt, known in bone and breath. A grandmother teaching by touch, a child learning by cold fingers and stinging dawns. This knowledge was never lost suddenly. It faded like breath on a mountaintop, one winter at a time. Now, some still practice it in remote communities, but the purity is different. The rhythms are changing. Even NASA has studied Chuño making, hoping to learn how to preserve food in space, because the Incas froze without electricity, dried without fire, preserved without chemicals, and they did it all using wind, sun, stone, and silence. Here, in this place where the sky feels close enough to touch, the Incas built a refrigerator not of machines, but of mountains, a cold vault in the clouds, and I wonder, how much of what they knew have we forgotten? How many answers sit in thin air, waiting for us to breathe them in, or have they already been scattered, carried off by the wind? The sun rose low and golden across the Nile, casting shadows that stretched like fingers across the sand. I stood at the edge of a ruin, not a tomb, not a temple, but something quieter and perhaps more vital, a granary. Its mud brick walls were thick and cool to the touch. The air inside still held a dryness, a hush that seemed intentional. This was not simply storage, it was strategy. Ancient Egypt was an empire carved not just in stone, but in grain. And here, buried under centuries of drifted silence, was one of its greatest weapons: food security. The Nile gave life, but it did not always give generously. Floods varied, crops failed, famine loomed in the gaps. But the Egyptians planned for that. Granaries lined with reed mats and crushed gypsum, chambers sealed so perfectly that even rodents, mold, and time itself were kept at bay. Some vaults held grain for decades, some held it for centuries. There are stories, real ones, of archaeologists unsealing these stores and finding wheat that would still sprout, still viable, as if the seed had only been sleeping. And it makes you wonder what compound lined those walls, what mixture of clay and mineral kept the air dry, the pests out, the hope in. No modern vacuum packer has replicated it fully. The sealing compound, lost. The precise geometry of airflow, forgotten. This was a civilization that saw food not just as sustenance, but as structure. Grain was not merely harvested, it was taxed, tallied, traded, and stored like treasure. The pharaoh's power rested not only in gold, but in barley. Hieroglyphs etched along the walls speak of harvest counts, of ration allotments, of granaries filled to bursting under state watch. These weren't barns, they were data banks, food banks, time banks, insurance policies against the wrath of the river. I passed my hand across one of the walls. The surface was smooth, but the silence behind it felt thick. You could almost hear the bustle of the ancient scribes, the tally sticks, the grain being measured and poured like liquid wealth. And nearby, always nearby, the temples. Priests oversaw both the harvest and the gods, because in Egypt, food was divine. When a famine struck and the Nile failed to rise, these stores were opened with ceremony. Offerings were made, grain was distributed, order was restored. That balance between survival and divinity was no accident. Food was faith made tangible. And now, thousands of years later, the vaults remain. Empty mostly, quiet. But here's the strange thing. Some of these granaries are directly adjacent to pyramid complexes, not just near them, attached, which raises a question. Were the pyramids only tombs for kings? Or were they also monuments to logistics, to food storage, and by extension to survival? It is tempting to think of ancient architecture only as symbol or ceremony. But in this dry wind, amid these earthen walls, I feel something more grounded, more practical. A civilization that planned for drought with the same precision it planned for death. A culture that knew a kingdom would fall faster from hunger than from any sword. So they built vaults that could outlast famine, and they nearly did. But time, relentless and soft, has taken its toll. The sealing methods, the compounds, the airflow tricks, all gone. All except the hushed echo left in the corners of these forgotten rooms. Another piece of knowledge buried beneath sand, another technology swallowed by the ages, and I am left with one final thought. When a grain of wheat can outlive its sower, what else might still be waiting just beneath the dust? The air was thick with salt and sea rot as I stepped into the remnants of an ancient Roman port. Shattered amphorae lay scattered like broken teeth. Crumbling vats lined with lime and clay stretched in long rows. The scent, even after 2,000 years, lingered faintly. Fish, brine, fermentation. This was the heart of a vanished empire's appetite. This was garum. To us it might seem like spoiled fish sauce, but to the Romans it was gold, not just for flavor, but for trade, for medicine, for power. In every outpost of the empire, from the British Isles to the sands of Syria, there were traces of this pungent fermented liquid. It flavored the daily meals of citizens and soldiers alike. It was poured onto lentils, into stews, over bread, even into wine. But garum was more than a condiment. It was infrastructure, made from the guts of fish, usually mackerel or anchovy, layered with salt and left in ceramic vats to ferment under the sun. It became a chemical symphony. Bacteria broke proteins into amino acids. Enzymes transformed rot into richness. The result was liquid umami, a taste of empire. And yet, something is missing. We know the ingredients, we know the basic process, but what we cannot recreate, not exactly, is the culture. Not the cultural moment, but the microbial one. Because each garum workshop, each region had its own starter cultures, unique bacterial strains passed down in stone, in air, in the skin of the vat workers, in the salt they used. Garum from Hispania tasted different from garum made in Campania. Not by accident, by design. Some varieties were thick. Others were filtered until golden and clear. The highest grade liquamen was worth fortunes, shipped in sealed amphorae, stamped with the names of elite producers. They had branding, reputation, trade routes built on taste. And in the kitchens of Rome, garum was used for everything, not just flavor. It was medicine. It treated wounds, relieved ulcers. It was even given to infants in diluted form. A spoonful of fish rot as a healing elixir. The military packed it in rations. Nobles served it at feasts. Doctors prescribed it. Garum was everywhere. And then it vanished. As the empire crumbled, so did the infrastructure needed to make garum properly. The knowledge of which ceramic mixtures kept the right temperature, which salts worked best, how to balance sun, time, and fermentation without contamination. We have recipes, yes. Apicius wrote them. Archaeologists have uncovered vats, fish bones, even residues. But the living cultures, the specific microbial ecosystems that made garum safe, rich, and shelf-stable, those are gone. Today, attempts to revive garum exists. Experimental archaeologists and chefs try their hand. Some come close, none are exact, because you can follow every instruction and still miss the flavor. That last, elusive note. It was in the clay, in the bacteria, in the sea air of a time long past. Standing beside those ancient vats, now dry and silent, I imagine the workers stirring the ferment, the salt crust on their hands, the fish oil on their tunics, and the smell, sharp, oily, alive. It was empire distilled, a flavor that conquered continents. And as I walk away, I wonder, if taste is memory, what does it mean when a flavor is lost? Not just the recipe, but the very essence of what made it sing. Garum is gone, but its ghost lingers in fragments, in clay shards, in the salty wind. Another treasure forgotten not in treasure rooms but in kitchens, not in battlefields but in barrels. And it leaves behind a simple truth: empires fall, but sometimes the first thing to vanish is the flavor. The door creaked open on wooden hinges, and the scent struck me first. Earthy, sweet, a little sour, a little smoky. Inside, the air was thick with spores. Hundreds of clay vats lined the floor like sleeping giants, their lids sealed with hempen wax. Motes of dust drifted through beams of light that pierced the rafters. This was not a kitchen. It was a laboratory, and also a temple. I had stepped into the world of the ancient Chinese fermentation guilds. 2,000 years before microbiology had a name, these artisans worked with organisms they could not see, only feel. They mastered invisible forces, wielding mold and yeast with the same precision a poet wields ink. They fermented soybeans until they became dark, liquid umami. They brewed rice into wines that could age for decades. They aged tofu until it bloomed with flavors that spoke of deep time and careful hands. They called it jiang or kueh, words that meant more than sauce or mash. These were living mediums, ingredients that breathed, ripened, matured. And yet, the processes were kept secret, passed down not in books, but through lineage. From master to apprentice, from father to son, guilds formed, families specialized, techniques were guarded with the same secrecy as royal decrees. The koji molds, microscopic fungi used to convert starch into sugar, were cultivated on steamed grains in dark chambers, fed with just the right amount of moisture, heat, and silence. Even a shift in wind could spoil a batch. A change in humidity could shift the entire flavor profile. But they knew. Somehow, they knew. The color of the ferment, the sound of bubbles rising, the subtle scent of sugar breaking down. Some guilds fermented for weeks, others for years. Some created soy pastes dense and pungent. Others crafted sauces thin, amber, and crystalline. In the same courtyards, vats for rice wine sat buried in the earth to maintain even temperature. In some regions, plum wine and nullet beer coexisted with pickled eggs and fermented bean curd. Each region had its own strains of mold, its own brewing seasons, its own whispered secrets. And yet, so much of it is gone. Today we have modern versions of soy sauce, of rice wine, of fermented tofu. But something is different because the original molds, the wild regional strains cultivated over centuries, are disappearing. Industrialization has brought consistency, but also sterility. The guilds faded. Some were broken during dynastic upheaval, others silenced during political shifts. Even when recipes survive, the microbial ecosystems do not. And what is fermentation if not a conversation between life forms? We have the vats, the tools, the words, but not always the life. Standing in one of the few surviving workshops, I saw a woman open a clay lid. Steam rose. The scent was rich and ancient. She pointed to the surface where white mycelium curled like frost across the mash. She said, "This is the soul. You do not stir it. You let it decide when it is ready." There is science here. Absolutely. But there is also something deeper. A trust, a respect, an understanding that food at its highest level is not manufactured. It is grown, coaxed, sung into being. And so much of that song is fading. The old guilds are gone. Their vaults of microbial wisdom lie unopened, or worse, forgotten. But in places where the old molds still live, where fermentation still follows the moon and not the clock, the taste remains, not quite the same, but enough to remember. Enough to wonder, if a sauce can carry history, how much of a civilization lives not in stone, but in flavor? The desert was silent when I arrived, just after dawn, the sand still cool beneath my boots, the sky already beginning to burn. And then I saw it, rising from the earth like a forgotten monolith, a cone of mud brick and ash, towering silently under the sun. At first glance, it looked like a tomb, but it was not built for the dead. This was a Yakhchāl, an ice house, a freezer born before electricity, before machines, before thermometers or thermodynamics had a name. In the heart of ancient Persia, nearly 2,000 years ago, they found a way to make ice and keep it frozen. Even as the summer sun blazed at over 100 degrees, they did it with clay, with wind, with geometry, and with a profound understanding of heat and time. I stepped inside, ducking beneath an arched entryway. Instantly, the temperature dropped, from scorching heat to a chill that raised the hairs on my arms. The walls were thick, over 6 feet in places, made of a special mixture of sand, clay, egg whites, goat hair, and ash. The surface was smooth, the air was still, the silence was complete. The structure worked in 2 stages. First, the ice was made. In shallow, shaded channels beside the Yakhchāl, water was poured and left to freeze during the frigid desert nights. Even here, winter brought nights cold enough for ice to form. Once frozen, the ice was harvested and brought inside, layered with straw, packed tight, sealed behind thick doors. Then the magic began. The conical shape of the Yakhchāl directed hot air upward. The thick insulation kept external heat from seeping in. Some had wind catchers, tall towers that pulled cool air from underground channels called quanets. These ancient air conditioners created a constant flow, pulling heat up and out. No fire, no fuel, just design. Ice harvested in January might last through August. Fruits, dairy, and even meat were stored here. Sherbets, medicinal herbs, luxuries preserved in silence beneath the sand. And yet, so much about these structures is still not fully understood. The clay composition varies from region to region. Some Yakhchāls remain cool even when partially collapsed. Others have degraded entirely. The airflow dynamics, how exactly they balanced ventilation and insulation, have not been completely replicated. Some modern engineers study them, trying to decipher the secrets of passive cooling. Because what the Persians built was more than a cold room. It was climate control. It was resilience. These structures were not only used in cities, but also along trade routes where caravans could restock on perishables. They represented a kind of infrastructure we no longer build. Silent, self-sustaining, in harmony with the land. And yet, as I stood inside, I could see signs of erosion, of neglect. The knowledge is fading. Many of these Yakhchāls are crumbling, buried by sand, their stories untold, but some remain intact. Some are still in use, in remote villages that remember what others have forgotten. A child's voice echoed through the chamber. Outside, someone had come to fetch water cooled in the pit below. It reminded me, this was never about technology for its own sake. It was about survival, about comfort, about reaching through the furnace of the desert and touching something cool, something alive. A breath of winter held in a jar of mud. And I wonder, what else have we buried? What other answers lie in ruins? Not because we could not understand them, but because we stopped trying. In the Yakhchāl, the desert speaks in silence, and the ice whispers back, that even the hottest places remember how to be cold. The canoe slid through still water, reeds brushing against its sides. The lake was quiet. Birds watched from the tangled banks. The only sound was the gentle splash of the paddle, steady and slow. Then, the earth rose from the water. At first, I thought it was just a small island, but as I looked closer, I saw the pattern, the symmetry. These were not accidents of nature. These were Chinampases, floating gardens, built by hand, tethered to the lakebed, breathed into life by the ancient Maya. This was not just farming, this was ecosystem engineering, the kind of innovation that doesn't need machines because it already listens to the rhythms of the world. Each Chinampas was a rectangle of soil and reeds, layered like pastry. Mud from the lake bottom, rich in nutrients, was dredged and heaped between rows of stakes. On top, crops flourished: maize, beans, squash, chilies, even flowers. But beneath, there was a system. Water flowed between the rows, bringing oxygen, removing waste. Fish swam through the canals, eating pests, fertilizing the soil. The roots of the plants dangled into water that never stagnated. Birds nested above. Insects pollinated. Microbes multiplied. What they built was not just a garden, it was a microclimate, a living machine. The Chinampas could produce food year-round. They resisted drought. They resisted flood. They recycled waste. They resisted flood. In some places, these floating farms could yield up to 7 harvests in a single year. And yet, there were no pumps, no plastics, no engines humming in the dark. Only biology, only balance. It is a strange thing to witness the intelligence of a forgotten farm. No blueprints, no patents, but knowledge deeper than paper. And here's the mystery. Even with all our science, we have not fully replicated what the Maya created. Not completely, because the secret was not just in the structure, it was in the soil, a living matrix of bacteria, fungi, and ancient silt. The microbial network beneath the Chinampas may have been key to their resilience, to their ability to regenerate. But today, much of that balance is lost. Modern attempts to recreate Chinampas often falter. The soil behaves differently. The yields are less stable. The self-sustaining rhythm has been broken. It makes me wonder, did the Maya know? Could they sense the microbial music beneath their feet? Did they pass it down not as formulas, but as ritual? A certain way to layer mud, a particular time to plant, a prayer whispered as roots touched water. In many ways, these floating gardens were more than agriculture. They were cosmology. They mirrored the order of the universe, the heavens above, the waters below, and life in balance between. Some still survive, hidden in the last corners of the old lake beds, maintained by families who remember, who refuse to forget. But most are gone, dried out, buried under cities, paved over by concrete and forgetfulness. The canals still remember, though. When the rains fall just right, outlines appear beneath the flood. Old geometry, sunken rectangles that once fed a civilization. I closed my eyes and imagined them full again. The soft sound of harvest, the shimmer of water under corn leaves, the scent of moist soil and flowers. A world where farming meant collaboration, not domination, where food was not extracted but invited. And I asked myself, if we could listen again, truly listen to the land, would we hear the floating gardens calling us back? The sandstone cliffs of Petra rose like fire in the morning light. Their colors shifted with the sun, rose, gold, deep crimson. But what drew me in was not the temples or tombs carved into the rock. It was the silence, The kind of silence that suggests something is missing, or something is hidden. I followed a narrow path between the cliffs, where the air grew cooler. Then I saw it, a line carved into stone no wider than a finger. It ran along the cliff face, turning, dipping, disappearing into a crevice. The Nabataeans had built it, a people who flourished in one of the driest places on earth. They were traders, yes. Caravans crossed the desert under their banners. But their power did not come only from incense and silk. It came from water. And their secret was knowing how to find it and how to keep it. In a land where it might not rain for months, they mastered a hidden infrastructure, a web of channels, cisterns, and collectors so subtle it vanished into the rock. They built catchment systems high in the cliffs. When rain did come, brief, violent, and rare, it was guided into channels. The channels fed reservoirs. The reservoirs fed the fields. Nothing wasted, not a drop. But they did more than catch water. They made it last. Underground cisterns, sealed with plaster, kept it cool. Covered wells reduced evaporation. Some aqueducts ran for miles, bringing water from distant springs. Even dew was captured, with fine surfaces positioned to condense the morning air, drop by precious drop. And in this desert, the Nabataeans grew abundance. Vineyards, olive trees, barley, figs, herbs. The ruins of terraced fields still trace the hillsides, their dry stones holding back the sand like ancient fingers. I climbed to one of the old reservoirs, its walls blackened with age. Inside, it was cool. A few birds fluttered above. The plaster was still smooth, still watertight. How did they make it? Some believe it was a mixture of ash, lime, and crushed ceramics. But the exact ratios, the curing methods, have faded. Today, we struggle to build tanks that last 100 years. The Nabataeans built ones that have lasted over 2,000. What we have are clues, remnants, shadows of a knowledge once whole, because they did not leave blueprints. Their genius was carved into cliffs, shaped into stone, whispered between generations. And now, much of it is buried. Sand has filled the channels. Cities have grown over the cisterns. We remember the facades of Petra, the grandeur, the artistry. But the real miracle was water, hidden, preserved, delivered in silence. As I walked back through the narrow gorge, I noticed more channels. Tiny, precise, worn smooth by centuries of flow. They were everywhere once you knew how to look. Not loud, not grand, but vital. It made me think, what defines a civilization? Is it the monuments they leave behind, or the systems they keep alive? The Nabataeans understood that control over water meant control over life, and they controlled it without dams, without pumps, without conquest. They did it with patience, with stone, with silence. And even now, beneath the sand, their network still whispers, a forgotten river flowing just out of sight. The city was quiet, even in ruin. Stones that once formed walls now sat in orderly rows, still aligned with uncanny precision. I was standing in the remains of Mohenjo-Daro, one of the crown jewels of the Indus Valley civilization. There were no towering monuments, no statues of kings, no inscriptions boasting conquest. What I found instead were bricks, tens of thousands of them, uniform, baked, laid out with mathematical care. And among them, a mystery, a structure unlike any other, raised platforms, massive storage rooms, ventilation shafts built into thick brick walls, a granary, or perhaps something more. Archaeologists have long debated its purpose. Some see it as a grain storehouse, others a ceremonial hall. But as I stood within its shadow, one thing was clear. This structure was built with intention, with knowledge of airflow, temperature, and time. The Indus people 5,000 years ago were engineering their food supply. Not just growing it, the granary was elevated. Air could circulate beneath it. The floors were segmented, possibly to separate different types of grain or to control humidity. Thick walls kept out heat. Narrow vents allowed breezes to flow through, cooling the stored food naturally. There were no electric fans, no climate control systems, but they understood the principles. It was passive refrigeration before refrigeration even existed, and they applied this knowledge across their cities. Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, all showed signs of planned architecture. Drainage systems, water tanks, storage buildings aligned with prevailing winds. This was not a scattered collection of huts. It was a networked civilization, organized, intentional, and perhaps most remarkably, peaceful. There are no signs of warfare, no palaces, no armies carved in stone, but there were granaries, which tells us something. To them, stability came not from swords, and yet we still do not know how they did it. The exact materials used in their bricks, the possible use of organic sealants to preserve grain, the mathematics behind their ventilation, how they kept food cool in one of the hottest regions on Earth. These details are missing. What we have is the shell, the framework, but not the full equation. They did not leave behind grand narratives. Their script remains undeciphered. Their myths, their names, their daily struggles, all silent. But the granaries speak. Through stone, I traced my hand along one of the platforms. The bricks were warm, but not hot. The interior still held a softness in the air, as if it remembered what it was made to do. Nearby, a well led down into cool darkness. Water, grain, air. These were the pillars of their survival, and it raises a question. How did a civilization that seemed to have mastered urban living, with cleanliness, organization, and food security, simply disappear? Was it climate, invasion, disease, or did they just walk away? Whatever the cause, their technology did not spread. Their climate-controlled granaries did not influence the world that came after. They were lost, buried under centuries of dust and indifference. But not forever. Now we are digging again, looking closer. And what we find is more than archaeology. It is a mirror. Because as our own systems strain under pressure, the wisdom of the Indus rises again. Simple, elegant, resilient, a cool chamber in a hot land, a reminder that real power does not shout. It whispers through the walls that hold our food. The jungle is never truly quiet. Even before sunrise, the air hums with life. Crickets, distant birds, the whisper of wind through leaves. But as I climbed above the tree line, I saw something that silenced even the forest. A reservoir, vast, still, perfectly aligned with the horizon. This was not a lake. It was not natural. This was a beret, one of the colossal waterworks of the Khmer Empire. Angkor Wat may draw the eye with its spires and carvings, but it is the water that reveals the mind of this civilization. From the 11th to the 14th century, the Khmer built a hydraulic network so vast and precise it rivaled any machine. They moved rivers, dug canals by hand, constructed reservoirs that stretched for miles, not just for drinking, not just for display, but to farm rice continuously, predictably, abundantly. What they built was not merely irrigation, it was control over the seasons, a hydraulic rhythm. During the monsoon, water was captured, slowed. During the dry season, it was released, directed, filtered. Fields were flooded at just the right depth, drained at just the right time, and the rice, the empire's foundation, was harvested 2 or even 3 times a year. Their landscape became an algorithm. Their reservoirs, the memory banks, their canals, the logic circuits. The whole system behaved like a water-based computer. No wires, no screens, only channels, gravity, and time. I stood at the edge of the West Beret, over 5 miles long, more than 1 mile wide. Its embankments rose like ramparts. Even now, it holds water. Even now, it listens to the sky. But something has changed. The logic that once timed the flow, that once connected the reservoir to the rice field in seamless order, has fractured. We know the layout, we see the channels, but the sequence is missing. Which gate opened first? Which canal fed which village? What was the signal? The Khmer left behind temples carved in stone, but their water system left almost no inscriptions. Its instructions were not written. They were embedded in the land, in the memory of its keepers. And when that memory faded, the system began to falter. Some believe the empire fell because the water failed, or because the people no longer knew how to make it flow. Too much rain in one year, too little in the next. Without balance, the machine broke, and yet the brilliance remains. Today, satellites trace the lost canals. Archaeologists walk dry channels where water once danced. Engineers marvel at the scale and the simplicity. Because the Khmer system needed no motors, no pumps. It worked with elevation, with timing, with patience. It harvested not only water, but wisdom. Standing there, as the sun lifted above the trees, I listened. The reservoir did not speak, but the breeze across its surface said enough. We often think of civilization as towers, as weapons, as trade. But here was a society that measured greatness in harvests, in harmony, in the quiet mastery of rain. And I wonder if we could hear the Khmer system again, if we could read its logic like lines of code, what would it tell us? Perhaps that the most advanced technologies are not always digital. Some are carved in stone, laid in mud, buried under leaves, waiting. A water computer, sleeping beneath the jungle. The ocean was quiet that morning. Waves rolled gently onto the black sand beach, and the smell of salt mingled with something else. Something rich, earthy, almost sweet. I followed it inland through palms and lava rock until I reached a circle of stones pressed into the soil. There was no smoke, no fire, just warmth radiating from the earth. This was an umu, a hangi, an emu. The names vary from island to island. Hawaii, Aotearoa, Samoa, Tonga, Rapa Nui. But the idea remains the same. A food pit, dug into the ground, heated with stones, covered with layers of leaves, cloth, and soil. A subterranean slow cooker. It looks simple. It is not. The process begins with stone. Not just any stone, but ones that can withstand fire without shattering. Basalt, andesite, lava rock. They are heated in a fire for hours until glowing red. Then they are arranged in a pit, layered carefully with green vegetation. Banana leaves, coconut husks, fronds that hold moisture. Next comes the food, taro, breadfruit, yams, sweet potatoes, chickens, fish, sometimes a whole pig, seasoned and wrapped. More leaves, more cloth. Then the entire pit is sealed with earth, tight, secure. And then you wait. Not minutes, hours, sometimes all day. But while the surface remains still, below the transformation begins. The heat of the stone steams the food. The moisture of the leaves prevents burning. The sealed earth traps aroma, flavor, tenderness. It is not baking, not roasting, not boiling. It is something in between, something ancient. When opened, the steam rises like incense. The taro is soft, earthy. The breadfruit splits like warm bread. The meat falls from the bone, infused with the scent of fire and fern. This was not just food, It was ceremony, a gathering of community, a marking of time, birthdays, marriages, harvests, farewells. But beneath the ritual was a technology, because this method did more than cook, it preserved. In humid tropical climates where food spoiled fast, the pit allowed meals to stay warm and edible for days. And here's the part that is often overlooked: the layering, the positioning, the humidity control. Not every pit worked equally. Some could cook for hours without drying out. Others failed. Too hot, too fast, too wet. What made the difference? The number of stones, their arrangement, the type of vegetation, the angle of the pit, the timing of the seal, all adjusted by instinct, by practice, by generations of memory. There are no blueprints, no temperature gauges, no written recipes, but in some communities, the elders still know. They can read the stones by the sound they make when struck, smell the leaves to judge moisture, press the soil and feel the heat rise. They cook with the earth as an oven and with time as a flame. Today, many of these food pits lie unused. Gas grills, electric ovens, supermarkets. But when I sat beside the pit, watching the steam rise into the canopy, I felt something more nourishing than food: continuity. Because in a world racing forward, this was a pause, a return, to fire, to stone, to soil. And I wondered, what would it mean to cook not just for speed, but for memory, not just to eat, but to gather? These pits are not ruins, they are invitations, not relics, but recipes, whispers from the earth that say, slow down, let the food take its time, let the heat teach us something older than hunger. The sun rose slow over the Tigris. The mud still clung to my boots from the riverbank. And in the ruins of an old house, just walls now, ankle high, I found a pot. It was cracked, heavy, lined with a residue so faint it looked like dust. But this pot had once held something alive. Not grain, not water. Beer. 5,000 years ago, in the cities of ancient Sumer, beer was not just a beverage, it was civilization. Long before writing, before laws, before kings carved their names into stone, there was fermentation, and the Sumerians had mastered it. In temples, in homes, in taverns, clay vessels acted as bioreactors. They transformed mashed grain and river water into a liquid that nourished, preserved, protected. Beer was not a luxury, it was food. Thick, sour, rich in calories and nutrients, safer than water, easier to store, and in many cases, distributed by the state itself. Wages were paid in beer, priests blessed it. Recipes were offered to the goddess Ninkasi, the patron of brewing. One of the oldest written texts in human history is not a battle hymn. It is a beer recipe, but what the Sumerians created was more than a drink. It was biotechnology. Their brewing vessels were made from porous clay, allowing for gentle oxygen flow. The mash, a blend of malted grain and warm water, was left exposed just enough to encourage natural yeast to find it. Fermentation began invisibly, slowly, then accelerated. The bubbles, the foam, the transformation. They filtered it with reeds, sipped it through straws, sometimes flavored it with dates, herbs, or honey. And they did all this without microscopes, without knowing what yeast even was. But they knew how it behaved. They understood that some batches spoiled, that certain combinations worked better, that temperature, timing, and vessel shape mattered. Each pot became a living laboratory. And the beer itself, sometimes thin like gruel, sometimes thick as porridge, became the foundation of daily life. Women brewed it, farmers drank it, scribes recorded it, and cities grew. But what is lost is the process. We can analyze the residues. We can reconstruct the grains. But we do not know the exact filtration steps, the starter cultures, the bacterial balance that made it safe in a world where pathogens lurked in every puddle. Modern beer is sterile, controlled, reproducible. Sumerian beer was alive, each batch unique, each fermentation a conversation with invisible worlds. Some archaeologists have tried to recreate it, using old grains, clay pots, wild yeast. But it is not quite the same, because the microbes that lived in those vessels passed from one brew to the next. They are gone, wiped away by centuries, replaced by dust. And that matters, because taste is microbial, texture is microbial, even safety is microbial. The Sumerians knew this in their bones, even if they did not know the words. And now, standing in the ruins, holding the broken rim of a pot that once foamed with life, I wonder how many cities began not with stone, but with fermentation. How much of our civilization rose from the heat of a buried jar? We say we built the world with fire and bronze, but maybe, just maybe, we also built it with beer, one clay pot at a time. The temple courtyard was empty now. Only stone remained, weathered, cracked, still warm under the sun. But centuries ago, this space would have pulsed with life. Chanting, drums, smoke rising in twisting trails of spice and fire. And in the center of it all, a drink. Thick, bitter, black as obsidian. Cacao. But this was not chocolate as we know it. This was a ritual, a formula, a biochemical ceremony crafted by the priests of the Mexica, what we now call the Aztec Empire. Cacao beans were sacred, used as currency, offered to gods, consumed by warriors and nobles in preparation for ceremony and battle. But the true magic was in the blend, because they did not simply grind cacao and mix it with water. They engineered it. They added chili for fire, honey for harmony, maize for strength, amaranth for blood and resilience. Sometimes fermented maize was used, bubbling gently, adding a sour tang and probiotic depth. Each ingredient selected not only for flavor, but for meaning. And in the alchemy of the cup, they created more than refreshment. They created transformation. The drink was believed to give clarity, energy, even visions. Consumed before rituals, shared in councils, poured as offering, it was a food. I sat beneath the shadow of a carved serpent and tasted a modern reconstruction. Bitter, sharp, electric. No sugar, no milk. Only ground seed, heat, and time. The texture clung to the tongue. The chili sparked at the back of the throat. A hint of smoke lingered. But even this was only an echo. Because what has been lost is the precision, the ratios, the preparation methods, the sequence of blending. Modern chocolatiers have tried. Ethnobotanists too. But no one has fully decoded the original emulsions, the way they achieved such thick, smooth texture without dairy or synthetic stabilizers. And then there is the question of fermentation. Some cacao was fermented in leaves, buried, left to awaken with wild microbes. Others were sun-dried, roasted over fire, crushed between stone rollers. Each region, each priesthood, each purpose had its own process. The seeds were sometimes mixed with amaranth dough, shaped into effigies, offered during festivals, then eaten as sacred communion. This was food technology braided with myth. What they crafted was not designed to be mass-produced. It was designed to change the state of the body, to prepare the mind for the sacred. And in this complexity, we see something astonishing. A society that understood emulsification before chemistry, that mapped the body's response to compounds through centuries of observation, that treated flavor not just as pleasure, but as a path. And now? Most of that knowledge is gone. We have the ingredients, but not the language. We have the remnants, but not the rhythm. Still, in certain highland villages, old ways linger. Cacao is still browned by hand, heated with stones, spiced with secrets. And when you taste it, truly taste it, something stirs. Memory, fire, a strange kind of stillness. It is not nostalgia, it is recognition. That flavor can be knowledge, that food can be a ritual, and that the gods perhaps still wait in the cup. The air in the highlands is thinner, brighter, and carries the scent of smoke and sour grain. It was early morning when I stepped into the courtyard of a small home carved into the hills of northern Ethiopia. A round clay stove sat at the center. Above it, a large flat griddle, the mitad, already warm, already waiting. The woman poured a batter onto its surface. It spread like silk across the heat, bubbling softly. This was injera, soft, tangy, alive. But the secret lay not in the pour, or the stove, or the fire, in a clay jar resting in the dark. Inside that jar was teff, a tiny grain, ancient and strong, mixed with water, left to ferment for 3, sometimes 5 days. And then, like magic, it rose, bubbling, breathing, transformed by microbes that lived only here, in this soil, in this air, in this family. This was not sourdough, this was older, more intimate, a spontaneous fermentation passed down like a song. But what is truly remarkable is how consistent it is. For thousands of years, families have made injera with no thermometers, no yeast packets, no lab equipment. And yet the balance between yeast and lactobacillus is almost always perfect. Fluffy, sour, shelf-stable for days in a hot climate. Modern science still cannot fully explain it. The microbial ecology of injera varies from region to region, even house to house. The wild yeast strains, the specific lactobacilli, the proportions, the interactions, a hidden genome of flavor and texture. Some researchers have tried to catalog the strains, but even now the map is incomplete. Too many variables, too much nuance, too many generations of adaptation. Because this is not just fermentation. It is memory, passed from hand to hand, jar to jar. In some homes, they never wash the vessel completely. A thin film remains, ensuring continuity. A microbial inheritance. Each batch connects to the last. Each meal links to the ancestors. And teff, the grain at the heart of it, is just as mysterious. Tiny, resilient, gluten-free, high in protein. Endemic to Ethiopia, its size makes it difficult to industrialize. Its yield is low. Its roots grow deep. It resists drought. It remembers hardship. Injera made from teff is soft, porous, tangy. It folds without breaking. It holds stews and stories. But outside of Ethiopia, it often loses something, substituted with rice or wheat or millet. The structure changes, the flavor dulls, because the microbes know the difference. They respond to the grain, to the altitude, to the hands that stir. I sat by the stove as the injera cooked. Steam rose. The bubbles popped, leaving behind perfect craters. The woman flipped none of them. They cook only on one side. The top remains soft, the bottom just firm enough. She placed the round on a woven basket, stacking it with others. Then she smiled. She said the microbes are like guests. If you treat them well, they stay. If you ignore them, they leave. In that simple truth lies the wisdom of generations. Injera is more than food. It is a collaboration between grain and air, fire and time, people and place. And I wonder, in a world chasing convenience and speed, what have we lost when we forget how to wait for something to rise? The scent found me before the door did. It drifted on the mountain air, wood smoke, salt, a trace of the sea. I stepped into a small workshop tucked deep in the forests of Japan's southern coast. The air inside was thick, still, ancient. Rows of fish, skipjack tuna, known here as katsuo, hung suspended like relics in a shrine. But these were not just drying, they were transforming, becoming something harder than wood, more delicate than paper, richer than memory. This was katsuobushi. It begins with fire. The fish is cleaned, filleted, and gently simmered. Then it is smoked, not once, but again and again. Each round takes hours. The total can take weeks. The smoke seeps into every fiber, drying the flesh until it becomes something entirely new. But the process does not end there. The next stage is fermentation. The smoked fish is stored in a wooden chamber where it is inoculated with a mold, usually Aspergillus glaucus. Yes, mold, the same kind used in miso and soy sauce. The mold grows across the surface, drawing out moisture, breaking down proteins, enhancing umami. After days, it is shaved off. The process repeats, sometimes once, sometimes twice, sometimes as many as 4 times, until what remains is a block of katsuobushi, hard as stone, feather-light, crystallized. It is then shaved again, this time into paper-thin flakes, whisper-light ribbons that dissolve in hot broth, releasing flavor built through months of transformation. These flakes are the foundation of dashi, the soul of Japanese cuisine. But the original craft is disappearing. Most katsuobushi today is made in industrial facilities. The fish is dried quickly, the fermentation skipped, the mold forgotten. And yet, here in this smokehouse, the old ways remain. I watched as a craftsman lifted a block of aged katsuobushi to his nose. He tapped it, listened, like a carpenter with fine wood. He said it was ready. But how did he know? Not by recipe, not by timer, by sound, by scent, by memory. Because true katsuobushi is not made with machines. It is made with patience, with silence, with the kind of attention that spans generations. And here is what we have lost. The specific mold strains used in older fermentations are gone. Some were local, passed down in spores embedded in the wood of the smokehouse. Others may have vanished during wartime, during modernization, during the rush for speed. With them went the subtle flavors, the ones that linger, the ones that feel like something deeper than taste. Because katsuobushi is not just food, it is time, concentrated. The smoke preserves, the mold refines, the waiting reveals. And when you taste it, truly taste it, you can feel its age. Not like something expired, but like something earned. It makes you pause, breathe slower. Notice the quiet in your own kitchen. And it leaves you wondering, how many flavors have we rushed past? How much wisdom have we shaved away? In a world that values speed above all, katsuobushi still waits in the shadows. A block of fish, turned to flavor by fire, by mold, by time. And the silence it leaves behind tastes almost like reverence. The wind off the fjord was sharp that morning, cold enough to bite through wool, cold enough to silence everything but the sea. But inside the longhouse, it was warm. The air smelled of smoke, milk, and honey. In a clay bowl, thick white curds rested in pale whey. This was skyr. Not quite yogurt, not quite cheese, something in between, something older than both. And beside it, a horn, half full with golden liquid, gently foaming. Mead, the drink of poets, of raiders, of survival. The Vikings were not only warriors, They were fermenters, chemists, keepers of microbial fire, and they used that fire to survive long winters, long voyages, long wars. Skyr was more than food. It was sustenance, dense with protein, light in fat, alive with cultures that protected against spoilage. It could last for weeks in the cold, traveled well, fed families, fed crews. Its taste was sour, clean, almost floral when made right, and it was made without thermometers, without modern starters. The cultures came from the milk itself, raw, unpasteurized, filled with wild bacteria passed down through generations. Each region, each farm, each wooden spoon carried its own invisible signature. And when you made skyr, you were not just curdling milk, you were cultivating lineage. The strain was part of the family. And then there was mead, fermented honey, water, sometimes herbs, sometimes fruit, but always wild. Honey, by itself, does not spoil, but add water, let yeast in, let time pass, and it becomes something else, golden, effervescent, laced with alcohol and myth. The Vikings drank it in ceremony, in celebration, in mourning, before voyages, after battle. It was warmth, it was energy, it was story. Some meads were sweet, others dry and sharp. Some were aged in oak, others in stone jars or buried in snowbanks. And just like skyr, the yeasts were not imported. They lived in the wooden vats, in the honeycombs, in the air. Over time, the mead makers learned which hives produced the best ferment, which flowers made the strongest drink, which seasons were kindest to the brew. They did not measure pH or count cells. They listened, tasted, waited. And what they created could last for months, sometimes longer, without spoiling. High in calories, naturally antimicrobial, fermentation became survival. So, in the long dark of the Nordic winter, it was not only swords that protected life, it was knowledge of how to coax sustenance from milk and honey, how to turn perishables into endurance. But that knowledge was fragile. As Christianity spread and the old ways faded, much of the original process disappeared. Some strains of skyr bacteria are now extinct. Others survive only in isolated farms, their full spectrum never mapped. The meads we know today are often filtered, sanitized, stabilized. But the wildness is missing. The original microbial ecosystems, honed over centuries, are gone or hiding. And yet, in some corners of Iceland, Norway, and the Faroe Islands, the old ways flicker. Skyr still thickens in wooden tubs, mead still bubbles in family basements. And the taste is not just flavor, it is history. It carries the salt of the sea, the smoke of the hearth, the memory of winters long gone. I sat by the fire, the skyr cool on my tongue, the mead warm in my chest, and I realized the Vikings did not conquer only with steel, they conquered with preservation, with fermentation, with trust in the invisible world. In every bowl, in every horn, a survival strategy older than memory, not brute strength, but quiet mastery, and in the silence between sips, a reminder that even in the coldest corners of the world, life, flavor, and resilience still ferment in the dark. I sit beneath a quiet sky now. The fire is low. The notes from distant places still cling to my pack. Salt from the fjords, ash from the Andes, the faint scent of cacao ground in shadowed temples. 15 lost technologies, 15 ways our ancestors learned to feed not just their bodies, but their empires, to preserve, to ferment, to transform. In clay vats beside the Tigris, in ice houses under desert suns, in the floating gardens of forgotten lakes. They listened to mold, trusted smoke, waited for the rhythm of stones to hold heat through the night. They turned waste into nutrition, spoilage into safety, hunger into ceremony, and they did it without wires, without machines, without written instruction, only memory, only patience. Each food was more than survival, it was signal. It said, "We are here, we understand the land, we can endure." But so much of it has vanished. The microbes, the molds, the unspoken ratios, not destroyed by fire or flood, but by forgetting. And now, as we chase the future, we are beginning to look back, to understand that progress does not always mean replacement. Sometimes it means return, because these were not just foods, they were networks, languages, clocks, the berets of Angkor, the granaries of Mohenjo-Daro, the fermenting jars of ancient guilds. They pulsed with life. They connected people across seasons and miles. And now they call to us again, not as relics, but as reminders. That flavor is memory. That fermentation is trust. That to feed a civilization is to shape its destiny. Another piece of the puzzle, another secret swallowed by the ages. But I have learned one thing on this path. History does not whisper. It waits. In jars, in pits, in ruins, in song. And if we listen, truly listen, we may still hear it bubble, still hear it rise, still taste what was never meant to be lost.